You're all still wrong about pronouns. If you're not new to the channel, you already know what time it is. I hope you have your beverage of choice nearby because we're talking about pronouns, baby. If all y'all don't know what a pronoun is, man's gonna tell you guys. Jordan Peterson has been rambling about him for a few years, but bro doesn't really know what he's talking about. A while ago, honestly too long ago, I made a video with a title that made everybody angry. And I know this because you all left comments on it. I called out left, right, woke, gender critical, gender questioning, gender fluid, you name it. Because not just the US, but most of the Anglosphere is engaged in endless bickering about pronouns. And I know that because gender critical is left in the UK, but right in the US, and it was a whole thing. But I don't care about that. The pronouns are a proxy war for religious and political ideologies, and I pointed that out. If you missed that video, I'll link it at the end because it's worth a watch. But I'll summarize my 6 points here so we can move on to even more good stuff and a very provocative suggestion on how to replace singular they that I think everybody should follow immediately. You're all going to love it. I love a dash of controversy. Today we're going to talk about a lot of what I left out of the last video, including a little more linguistics. We're going to discuss how pronouns do and don't change, and we're going to get to that spicy suggestion for replacing singular they. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Taylor Jones. I've got a PhD in linguistics, and I'm an expert on culture and cross-cultural communication. And here on the channel, I love discussing language learning, and culture. This week, buckle up. It's going to get bumpy. This is Language Jones.
This week's video is sponsored by linguistics. Do you find yourself getting frothing mad over a part of speech? Do you think some accents are proof that the people who have them are stupid? Do you suffer from folk etymology, hallucinated accent syndrome, sapir-whorfism, or related conditions? It's time to leave that behind, because it's a new day with linguistics. Introducing linguistics, the revolutionary field that enhances your communication, broadens your perspective, and deepens your understanding of the world around you. With linguistics, you can analyze language structure, decode hidden meanings, and even learn new languages faster than ever before. Whether you're navigating dialects, understanding regional slang, or cracking the code of ancient texts, linguistics can help you get back to leading a full and satisfying life. Side effects may include improved critical thinking, echolalia, implosive stops, hapology, apocope, diuresis, spontaneous language acquisition, decreased urges to correct grammar, increased urges in the bedroom, night terrors, and tweed. Linguistics is not for everybody. Do not engage with linguistics if you are an economist or physicist and you think you are going to revolutionize the field with a publication correlating presence of future tense marking with fiscal responsibility. Do not try linguistics if you are impregnable or are currently being treated for Dunning-Kruger. Ask your doctor if linguistics is right for you, because it's a new day with linguistics. Linguistics.
So in the last video on pronouns, I made 6 points. First, most of the people arguing most passionately about pronouns couldn't reliably identify a pronoun if their life depended on it. You're all wrong about pronouns. Second, you're wrong about gender, both what it means in linguistics and what it means to gender activists. Third, you're wrong about how hard new pronouns are. They're not that hard. Fourth, you're wrong about how easy they are, because they're also not that easy either. And fifth, everybody is ignoring culture and individual versus collectivist cultural orientation, and that's a main battleground here. And sixth, you're wrong about inclusion. I covered everything from Star Trek to Singing in the Rain and pronouns from German to Zulu, which I might discuss here too, so it's worth a watch after this. But I realized in the last year or two since I released that video that I didn't necessarily explain, what the fuck a pronoun actually is. I gave some examples of pronouns being weird or gender and linguistics not being what you might think it is, but a lot of people have asked for a basic explanation. So I'm going to do that, but along the way, I'm going to touch on old pronouns English doesn't have anymore, new pronouns you probably don't realize are pronouns, how languages naturally develop new pronouns even though pronouns are claimed to be a closed class that doesn't admit new members, and a spicy suggestion for gender fluid and gender non-conforming English speakers. So, pronouns. What are they? At their simplest, they're a word or a group of words that can substitute for a noun or a noun phrase. That needs some unpacking. In modern linguistics, we think of things in terms of phrases, whose class is determined by what is, in some sense, the most important word in the phrase. So cheese is a noun. Wheel is a noun. A cheese wheel is a noun phrase made up of two nouns. A big yellowish green dog is a noun phrase, even though it's got adjectives in it. So I can say, I saw a big yellowish green dog eating a wheel of cheese, but then you can ask, did he finish it? He replaces big yellowish green dog, which is already getting tedious to say, and it replaces the cheese wheel. Pronouns are actually a subtype of proform. They're the ones that replace nouns. It's right there in the name, dummy. But there's other pro forms like did so, as in I asked her to help and she did so right away. It's replacing helped, it's replacing the verb. Where our political and ideological discussion goes off the rails actually happens before we even think about gender, if you can believe it. Think about pronouns in your bio. It's always some shit like she, her, hers, or they, them, theirs. Great. Except that's barely scratching the surface of either case marking or types of pronouns. But people think you're being a smartass when your third person pronouns in bio are he, him, to him, with him, his, himself, each other, who, whom, to whom, with whom, whose, somebody, not someone, and it governs subjunctive mood, etc. Pronouns come in a lot of flavors. There's the personal pronouns, I, me. There's the reflexive pronouns like myself. But there's also a lot more than just me, myself, and I. There's reciprocal, like each other, as in Spider-Man and other Spider-Man saw each other. Or demonstrative pronouns like this. No, like the word this. There's relative pronouns like who and the man who played Roger Murdoch in Airplane. Or guess who I saw today. There's the interrogative pronoun like who did you see? There's indefinite pronouns like someone, as in someone really loves you, which comes right back around to the relative pronoun guess who. But of course, most of these don't mark gender in English, and some of them even mark case instead, like whom. Some mark both, like him or each other. Try saying, each other saw the Spider-Man. It doesn't work unless you're going for a J.J. Jameson meets E.E. Cummings thing. Now, in linguistics, not all of these are still considered pronouns because we've restricted that term to more specific kinds of things I'll explain later. But in traditional grammar, those are all pronouns. In Intro to Linguistics, they'll teach you that pronouns are a closed class. Basically, a language will have a set number of them, and then that's it. And this is basically because they're function words, not content words. Function words are words like of. What the fuck does of even mean? It doesn't mean anything. It serves a function that relates two other content words into a larger structure that then has meaning. A wheel of cheese. But pronouns are not really a closed class. Yes, it's a lot harder to learn new ones, and new ones develop way less frequently than new verbs or adjectives or nouns, like he yeeted his cringe Cybertruck, but they're not really a closed class. In fact, most of you would be fine with the sentence, bro yeeted his cringe Tesla. And that use of bro is an organic example. It's just happening. In fact, despite being derived from brother, I've seen it used to refer to female humans. You know, the class of people who can never be a brother, more times than I can count. I co-wrote an entire linguistics paper that was published in a special edition of American Speech that demonstrated that a neighbor functions as a first-person pronoun. We actually argue that there are 12 N-words in Black English, and that they fulfill both pronominal and social honorific functions. It's a fun paper, and I'll link it in the description. It's also saved lives and livelihoods, but that's another story for another day. Some other new pronouns include man, especially how it's used in London, a gente in Brazilian Portuguese, neg in Haitian Creole, in which I could be described as a neg blanc. Some uses of ass in English. John McWhorter points out that saying you fired his ass does not mean that you terminated his posterior, and depending on how far back you want to go, você in Portuguese from Vuestra Merced, generic on in French, and tons of others. And that's just the ones that developed naturally. There's also ones that didn't develop naturally, like they and them in English. And no, I don't mean the new gender-neutral third person. I mean the whole damn paradigm. Those are Viking pronouns that replaced the actual English pronouns about 1,000 years ago. Except not everywhere, and there are places where there are still remnants of the older forms in non-standard dialects of English. English used to have heo instead of they, hira instead of theirs, kind of like ihr in German, nein. Heo or hie for direct object, him or heum for indirect object, like to heum, and also for with. By the 10th century, the H wasn't always pronounced, so it's sort of like the Johnny Carson of pronouns. Ayo! Remember these because I'm definitely bringing them back later. Here's the thing. Pronouns are like passive voice. People have strong feelings about them, but can't identify them reliably. So there's lots of things that people think are pronouns that aren't. We're talking titles like doctor and professor. We're talking descriptors like that doofus, terms of endearment like my little cabbage, and terms of abuse up to and including slurs. When people put kite emojis in the comments of my video because it sounds like an anti-Jewish slur, that's not a pronoun. And in fact, there's a gray area that linguists Collins and Postal call imposters, which is also a great film. The 1998 Stanley Tucci, Oliver Platt movie with Tony Shalhoub and Steve Buscemi. It's great. But their version is things like, would your highness like more wine? Or daddy loves you. So how can you tell a pronoun? Well, they do pronoun things. Now, In linguistics, some of my previous examples have more technical names, so himself is an anaphor and who might be a complementizer, but they still do pronominal kind of stuff. What do I mean by that? This relates to some wider areas of linguistic inquiry, but basically they have to co-refer with a noun phrase. They refer to the same thing, and they can't be co-referential with something else in their immediate domain, which is detailed and technical, but basically separating pronouns from anaphors, which must be licensed by a noun or a pronoun. So like, he saw himself is a perfectly normal sentence, but himself saw each other, just no. Pronouns will also trigger verb agreement and can license possessive, so like, he hurt his hand. That's what makes first-person use of the N-word so cool. It shows up with the possessive my. It's not a third-person noun phrase that's being used figuratively to talk about first person like help a brother out. It's not what Colin's supposed to call an imposter. It's actually doing pronoun stuff that a brother can't. You don't hear people saying a brother hurt myself, but you absolutely do hear that with the N-word. So people are arguing about pronouns, but nobody's actually talking about verbal agreement and licensing other co-referential possessive pronouns in their immediate domain or anaphora or whatever else, because they're arguing about gender. So what's gender in linguistics? It's basically genre. I've heard it taught unironically as flavor many times, as in nouns come in two flavors in this language. It's just a category. When you look further into it, broad patterns emerge across lots of languages. Often they differ along a binary split, and men and women get assigned to different classes, and we use men and women as a shorthand for the entire class of nouns because, well, men and women are pretty memorable. That, and often one of the terms is derived from the other by virtue of an additional morpheme. And most of what triggers gender agreement in many languages is actually morphological shape and phonology and not semantics. Put simply, it's about what the noun sounds like. Don't believe me? Look at words in Spanish that end in O versus words that end in A. With a few exceptions, the O words are masculine and the A words are feminine. Of course, the word for a woman doesn't have an A at the end, but we know it's feminine because it triggers feminine agreement in adjectives and determiners and so on. But it would be unhinged to say that everything that has an A at the end is female in any meaningful sense. Tables aren't carrying little baby tables to term. Now, you may have heard that German speakers are more likely to describe inanimate objects that are grammatically feminine, like a bridge, with all sorts of words that are feminine stereotypes, like dainty or whatever. And that Spanish speakers will describe that same bridge in manly terms because it's grammatically masculine in Spanish. Unfortunately, the study that all comes from was totally debunked, and it turns out that the woman who authored that study, and I use those terms loosely because it was never peer-reviewed and published, she cooked the data. So as exciting as it is, it's discredited. There's also a totally different component. Many languages mark gender along a hierarchy of animacy. Rocks, inanimate. People, extremely animate. And different things like lightning or domesticated animals may fall on different points on that hierarchy. Languages will have a cutoff somewhere, and everything higher is animate and lower is inanimate in terms of grammatical categories. I'm not a historical linguist, so somebody can leave me an explanation in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that was originally the case in what we've reconstructed for Proto-Indo-European, and that masculine and feminine evolved out of that system in a bunch of languages later. And they keep evolving. So for morphophonological reasons, in Dutch, which used to have the masculine, feminine, and neuter system just like German still has, Dutch now only has two genders, common and neuter. Not what you probably expected. Not only that, but there's tons of other kinds of noun classes, so Zulu has 14 or 17 depending on how you count, and those genders are things like people, long things, abstract concepts, evidently a lot of foodstuffs, and a few others. And almost half are the plurals of the others, so ntu is person, but it's not a word on its own. You have to say umuntu, a person, or abantu, people, or isintu, tradition, or ubuntu, humanity. Now, in many languages, pronouns mark gender. Often those align with masculine and feminine noun classes when talking about people. However, there's often weird overlap. So une personne is feminine in French and takes feminine agreement, even if the personne is a mec with a bit who identifies as un homme. In English, we basically only mark gender on third-person animate pronouns, which therefore exclusively aligns with the semantics of biological sex and social gender roles, and it's a whole thing. People who maybe don't feel like the gender binary fits them, I'd say biological sex, but there's vanishingly few people who don't fit one of the two big categories and who want explicit recognition from everybody else that they don't. So people who don't feel like the social gender binary fits them may request neopronouns like they and them be used when referring to them. The problem here is that that doesn't work. It could work, in theory. But while pronouns actually do change, they basically never change from external social pressures. For decades, activists have been pushing for gender-neutral singular they, and in that time, more people have adopted gender-neutral singular bro in more contexts than have adopted singular they. I hear women referred to as bro and refer to others as bro way more often than they, because it's undergone a natural process of semantic bleaching, just like other heretofore masculine words, like the N-word. Yes, some of this has been bottom up as social media has allowed greater inter-community and inter-dialect communication. So a lot of innovations seem to start in poorer, blacker speech communities, at least in English, so it might be comparing apples and oranges. But there's something genuinely hilarious about watching linguistic activists push for gender-neutral they, only to get the semantic bleaching of four, count them, four terms for men. Third person bro, third person man, first person use of the N-word, and second person plural, you guys, sometimes reduced to you guys. And of course, the suffix "m" has become so semantically bleached that now people are upset about it because while it used to literally mean a human person, now people have reanalyzed it as meaning a male human person, and so want to replace things like chairman with chairperson, which sounds like the worst superhero. My power? Becoming gender-neutral furniture. Anyway, I do think that there is a need for what people want singular they to be, but we're going about it all wrong. So permit me a modest proposal. Just use the original English pronouns. There's two flavors of this, two genders. One option is that everybody gets to talk how they want, but if you want to refer to people who don't want to be referred to with he or she, use the old English plural that's no longer used. AO. Possessive era, and the oblique case would be something like M or M in my accent. Fun fact, this still lives on in a handful of non-standard dialects of English, and there's some argument that M in Southern American English and Black English is not the deletion of the sound at the beginning of them, but is just the survival of M. I've gotten in trouble in the past for using singular they, but pronouncing it how I thought was normal, which is to say, without the and with the pen merger, meaning I said M. I was scolded for misgendering somebody who went by them, and I was like, that's what I said. They'd heard him. The spicier version of my proposal is this. If you think gender ideology is ruining America or whatever, and you don't want those new pronouns in your language, then why not just adopt the older pronouns in all instances? Maybe singular they can be just for the people who you disagree with, and everybody else can be referred to with AO. That is, if you like them, you can call them AO, as in, AO's my best friend, and I've known him since AO were a kid. AO used to share toys with me. Of course, now, AO identifies as gender nonconforming, so it's really hard for me to remember to call AO they instead. Anyway, let me know what you think about that. I read the comments, so leave me one. If all y'all like what a brother's doing with the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave man a comment. If you guys want to support the channel, y'all can with super thanks or over on patreon.com/languagejones. And for those who don't like it, AO can keep it to themselves. Until next time, happy learning.